Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new installment of the Elpin Academy. Today's going to be a short one. We're going to be talking about an offer of employment, which is something that's going to be included in a number of immigration applications. It could be a work permit application that's LMIA exempt. It could be an LMIA application where you would have to draft or help review a job offer to include with the LMIA, and you would probably use that same job offer later on to apply for a work permit. There are several PNP applications and some permanent residence applications where you also need to include evidence of a work permit or proof of an offer of employment. And in those cases, I think this will be helpful to just at least set up the main guidelines in terms of how to create an offer of employment and what are the main elements. Okay, so let's start with what type of document is going to be included with the application. Some employers, and especially more sophisticated employers, they would have employment agreements that set out various clauses that basically discuss the relationship between the employee and the employer, termination clauses, IP clauses, which law governs a lot of different things. And some other employers might be less sophisticated or they might be simpler in the way that they handle their business, and they might just have an offer of employment. Either of those can be used. Sometimes they might use both. They might provide the employee with an offer of employment, which kind of just summarizes, it's a letter that summarizes their relationship, but then there's the employment agreement. And sometimes I include whichever they have, either of them. Sometimes I include both. I just make sure that they are consistent, because sometimes you might have an offer of employment that just lists some things, but the employment agreement goes into details of other things that are inconsistent with the offer. So just make sure that they are consistent. And part of my job as an immigration representative is to review the employment agreement or the offer of employment and to make sure that it meets the requirements for the type of work permit or application that the employee is applying for. I sometimes have to draft job offers, and we'll take a look at what this looks like very basically. And I do this if I mean, normally what I do is that I ask the client or the employer if they have already an offer of employment, if they have a format that they use or an employment agreement, and to provide me a draft, normally in Word format, so that I can make my observations. And my observations are always about how to make it fit the application that they're applying for. I'm not an employment lawyer, I'm not a contract lawyer, so I'm always very careful about not meddling with the clauses that deal with contract or employment law. This is also the reason why I don't feel comfortable drafting an employment agreement. And I'm always very careful about not going beyond the extent of my competency, and I recommend that you do the same. Drafting an offer of employment is easy. We'll take a look at a very simple one. But drafting an employment agreement is something that should be left to the experts in employment, contract law, labor law, and things like that. The musts of an offer of employment: the employee's name or the applicant's name, start date of employment. Sometimes it could be an extension of a job that has already started. So sometimes we have wording that says your job, which already commenced on whatever date or which already commenced, is being extended for another 3 years, subject to the terms of the offer of whatever date. But sometimes it might be a new, fresh offer. Title of the position, the hours per week. I think this is important to include, not just have full time or part time, but hours per week. Some permits, some applications, they're very specific about these elements. Salary, benefits, and make sure you're very inclusive in the benefits. Make sure that the employer has listed everything that this person will be receiving, and obviously that they don't include things that the employee will not be receiving. All these offers are always what drives compliance reviews and audits by IRCC or ESDC, if applicable in the future. So you always want to make sure that what's there is being provided to the employee, and the main duties. And obviously, when we're looking at the main duties and we're looking at the offer, we want to make sure that it coincides with the knock and that we have in mind for the type of application that we have in mind. So I always want to make sure that the offer in general matches that lead statement of the NOC, the occupational classification that we're submitting, or that we're using for the work permit that we're submitting, and that a substantial number of the main duties of that national occupational classification are present in the letter. Just to give you an example, let's say we have a NOC code that has 8 duties. I want to make sure that those 8 duties, at least 5 of them are present in the letter. If there's 10 of them, then maybe that seven, 6 to 7 are present in the job offer letter. It's not copy pasting. It's a matter of sitting down with the employer, sitting down with the employee, looking at what they drafted, and making sure that the language in the job offer is very knock heavy. That's a term that I like to use. It's very consistent with the knock. And sometimes you might have to add a few things and even go back to them and tell them, does the employee do this and this and that? And they might say, yes, they do that. But you want to make sure that the most important things about of the most important duties of that knock are contained there, not copying and pasting, and also that the most important keywords are contained there. So sometimes you might have a few. So the example that we'll do, for instance, will be a database administrator. So you're going to want to use the word database and things like that. They're going to be very present there. If you're doing an application for someone who is a supervisor, you're going to want to make sure that things that relate to um, managing schedules of others, disciplining others, assigning work, um, overseeing others, that is very present in there. And always think of the type of work permit that you're applying for, right? So if you're applying for a work permit for a technician in their free trade agreement, then make sure that the duties really encompass that. If you're applying for a work permit for a senior manager, for an executive, make sure that the duties really involve high level management, managing other managers, high level strategy, and things like that. So these are all the things that kind of like go into my mind when I'm reviewing an offer or an employment agreement that has been drafted or I'm doing one myself. This is a very basic job offer. These are the elements that I would include. Um, I didn't. I copied some duties from and obviously changed them a little bit from a client of mine, but I didn't. There were actually more. I just wanted to kind of like give you a sense of what it is. So you would have a date. You would have the name of the employee, the address, the company, what's the position, and I always like to include the knock code as well. Again, make it very obvious to the officer that the employer is in line, or has in mind a knock code which is consistent with the work permit that we're applying for. When is the date that the employment would start? Will start. I always like to include this language of or anytime thereafter when the employee can secure the proper work authorization, because it might be that the work permit takes a while, so they won't be starting on that particular date. And for the date, I try to pick a date in the future that kind of matches how long the work permit will take to be issued. Not too far in the distant future, but not too soon. The term, the place of employment, sometimes it might be a particular place. Sometimes they might report to an office, but be working from multiple locations. Sometimes some job offers include the name of the supervisor. It's not mandatory, but you can include that or who they report to. The hours per week, compensation, benefits. And then this is a database analyst offer, right? So I want to make sure the word database, data is very present there. I even have it in every single bullet point. It's not like it has to be, but it's there. It's very salient. Um, and I'm including things such as defining and developing data requirements, understanding data requirements, conducting research into data requirements, reviewing and developing data administration policies. You'll find that in the NOC 21223, these are going to be there. And then just you ended. We're looking forward for you to joining our team. Sincerely, very important that it's signed by the employer and that it's signed by the employee. So that's what an offer of employment normally looks like. If it's an employment agreement, it's going to be a lot bigger than this. It's going to include other clauses. Focus on the things that really matter to the work permit that you're dealing with, and make sure that there's always duties and that the duties coincide with the knock. Because it's very common for employers to not include duties in contract or job offers, but it is very important for the type of immigration applications that we do. So this is Andrew Carvajal. This was another installment of the Alpin Academy. I think I forgot to mention my name at the beginning. And I hope that it's helpful, and we'll see you at the next one. Thank you for watching. If you want to continue learning, be sure to explore the full range of resources available to immigration and legal practitioners through the Alpin Academy and Alpin's CPD courses. Visit alpin.ca/academy to access the entire library of practical, on-demand content.